small till it ain't, till it ain't, till it ain't, till it ain't. I'm building up a wall till it breaks. She hated when I call and it's late. I don't wanna keep you waiting. I hope I never keep you waiting. She think I know it all, but I don't.
Welcome to the Mixtape with Scott. I'm the host, Scott Cunningham. I'm a professor of economics at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. And this is a podcast devoted to the personal stories of living economists and the creation of a bit of an oral history of the profession. It's a very selected oral history because it sort of follows my own interests, which kind of ramble a little bit, and they follow through certain threads. This season, I've been wanting to do more of a interviews with people that I just consider to be the quote children and grandchildren of the credibility revolution. And mainly I think of that as the students and the students of the students of Orley Ashenfelter, as well as Hito Embens, Josh Angrist, David Card, Alan Kruger, sort of this collection of Orley Ashenfelter, I said him, this collection of people that were really instrumental in changing empirical practices in labor economics in the latter part of the 20th century and early 21st century. But then out of that influenced a lot of the other fields of economics, as well as have increasingly had a lot of impact, even influencing people outside of economics. And today's guest is an example of one of those people. This is an interview with an economist at named Miikka Rokkanen at Amazon. He was a student of Josh Angrist at MIT. And this kind of fits with another theme that I've been really interested in, which is the increasing demand for PhD economists in industry, which has also seen sort of a surge over the last, I guess, 15 years, where particularly at Amazon, where they now employ a significant number of economists. By some reports, they as a firm have the most economists of anybody in the world. Don't know exactly how that's measured. The government has more, but it must be within some sort of agency level, and Amazon has the most. I'm going to turn it over to Miikka here and me to hear his full story. But I wanted to say thank you to everybody that supports the podcast and finds it interesting. That sounded funny. That I don't have to thank you for finding it interesting, but I do thank you for supporting it. And I'm going to turn it over to these two fellas right now. Thanks a lot. Well, it's a pleasure to have with me someone on the show that I've kind of been following on LinkedIn for a little bit, and but haven't had a chance to meet before. For the sake of the listener, can you tell us your name, your full title, and who pays your paycheck?
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. So my name is Miikka Rokkanen, and I'm a principal economist at Amazon at the moment.
Oh, okay, great. All right, Miikka.
Yes,
Okay, great.
that's a
Okay,
perfect pronunciation.
perfect. All right, that's a first for me then. Usually I get it wrong. All right. Well, before we get started, I wanted to start off with an icebreaker. So, what's a vacation that you went on in the past that could either be recent or it could be a long time ago, whatever? It might not be your favorite. It might not even be. It might not even be your least favorite. But for some reason, you still think about it every now and then.
Oh, okay. That's actually I thought it was going to be a hard one, but that's an easy one. I have to say a road trip in California, driving
Uh,
the what's the coastal highway? Highway one?
Pacific Coast One or something.
Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah.
driving that from like we started our road trip from San Diego and drove somewhere above San Francisco where you start having like the big trees.
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah,
and
the
so
redwood trees. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So like with Avenue of the Giants or something like that, the place was called that we made it to.
Ah,
So
I've done that
that was a
one.
magical trip.
Ah,
That was a honeymoon trip, and it was
oh,
magical.
really? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great. I've only done it once. Also driving. It's a little. It's you got to keep your eyes on the road.
Oh yeah, yeah. Which is tough, given the
It's tough.
scenery.
It's so pretty.
Yeah.
I know. That's great. Well, okay. Before we kind of get into your career and stuff, I was just curious. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Finland, in a pretty small town in central Finland that has, at least at the time, had like roughly 12,000 people.
Mm.
So I grew up there with my mom and dad. I'm an only child.
Okay. Oh, you're an only child. What
Yes,
was that?
yes.
What was it like? What was the town like?
I thought it was a great place to grow up. I've had a period of time later, maybe in my teenage years when I thought it was, small and boring.
Yeah.
But in hindsight now, looking back and being a parent myself and so on, I thought it was a great place to grow up, and it was
Okay.
close to a few of the bigger cities in
Yeah.
Finland, so that also kind of gave you the opportunity to have a little bit more action when
Right.
needed.
Right. Right. What did your mom and dad do for a living?
My mom is I'm trying to do the translation. Let's see. Sh- maybe closest I can think of is like an executive assistant or
Oh, okay.
something along
Mhm.
those lines. Was working at a local newspaper, and my dad, there was an airplane factory in a town next to our town. So my dad was there again. Let me see if I look for a translation of what he was doing. He was kind of a maintenance guy at the
Mm.
factory. Let's put it that way.
Oh, okay. Okay. So what kind of games did you like playing as a little kid? In this.
So so I was so I, so you know I was an ice hockey player growing up.
Oh, okay.
So that was my thing. I was a big hockey fan. Finland won the World Championships in ice hockey in '95. So that was a
Oh,
big
yeah.
life-changing event for me. I wanted to
Right.
become a hockey player, and
Yeah.
since the goalies had the most cool gear, I became a goalie.
Oh, you were a goalie. From
Yeah, and
what
I
age
actually
to what age?
I was so it was sometime in let's see, I probably started playing when I was 10 or so, and I played until I was 14 or 15 around that
Hmm.
time.
Hmm. Hmm. So, uh, is that the most popular sport in Finland?
Oh yes, yes, definitely,
Oh,
definitely. I think
okay.
soccer is probably the next one, and
Yeah.
it's pretty close. But
Uh-huh.
I like to think of hockey as our kind of unofficial national sport.
Oh, okay. Okay. Were all your buddies growing up? Were they also playing hockey with you?
Yeah, yeah, a lot of them were playing. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So if it was the summertime and it was a Saturday afternoon and stuff, are you still playing hockey?
Oh no, then over the summer it would be swimming and
Oh,
just playing outside. There was kind of a this forest next to our the place we
oh,
lived,
okay.
and
So it
so
was
playing there.
it's just a very beautiful, natural, a lot of natural area where you live.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
It's just like a small town childhood.
Yeah. So you could just like as a kid, you just sort of kind of got to wander and go wherever you wanted to.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It was
Yeah.
very big on biking, so it was just
Yeah.
biking around from place to place.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So when you were little, were you wanting to be a hockey player when you grew up, or was it
Oh yeah.
just that's what you wanted to be?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I think it was I wish I remembered there was a there's a letter I've written to my teacher in elementary school where I think I'm announcing that I'm gonna be playing in the NHL when I grow up.
Uh-huh.
And I actually had this kids map book, or like a book that was, it had maps and it had like stories of different places in the world.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I remember that there was a one page story about St. Louis
Yeah.
in that book, and I guess I was a little bit of a St. Louis Blues fan at least at some point. So I was determined that I'm gonna move to St. Louis one day and play hockey. Well, now I live 2 hours away from St. Louis. I don't play hockey
Mm.
anymore, but I got pretty close.
Yeah. Wait, so you got pretty close as a young person to kind of go into the next level?
Oh no, no, not at all. I like to claim that a knee injury ruined a promising career, but it was maybe not that promising in reality.
Okay. Well, so what was high school like? Was it a big school where you went to school, or was it sort of smaller?
No, yeah, it was pretty small. I think it was I want to say probably, let's say, like maybe 60 students per class, like per
Okay.
cohort
Yeah.
at the school. There was one high
Mm.
school in my hometown that
Yeah. So it
everyone
was all
went
your
to.
friends. Like, I mean, it was just you went to high
Yeah,
school,
yeah, that was a lot of fun.
everybody you'd
Yeah,
ever known.
yeah, exactly. So there was many more elementary schools, but then
Yeah.
only one middle school and one high school in
Mm,
town. So you know,
mm.
when going from elementary school to middle school, you got to know a lot of new people, and it was exciting and so on. But middle school, high school, it was pretty much with the
Same
same
people.
folks. With one catch though, I think this is potentially different from the U.S. That in Finland there's a big vocational school
Mm.
side of the high school level. So if you're there's kind of like a vocational track and an academic track after middle
Uh,
school basically. So
okay.
you can either choose to go to vocational school for 3 years and then you become a plumber or a car mechanic or whatever and then enter the labor market, or you go to high school for 3 years and then after that potentially go to college and so on. So there's this division in the sense, some of
Mm.
some of my friends choose the vocational track and went to those vocational schools, and some of us went to the high school.
Did it ever cross your mind that you might not go to high school?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I don't know where this is coming from, but I remember a time at least when I wanted to go to the vocational school and become a cook. I'm not sure if I was even that excited about cooking, but there was a moment of time in middle school where thought that being a I want to make food for a living, but in the end of
Mm.
the in the when the actual time came to make decisions, it was pretty clear for me that high school is where I'm going to be
Why?
going.
Heck, what were you noticing about yourself?
So so if, so so one thing I'm super grateful for my parents for is that they always valued education. My parents have not gone to college, have not gone to high school even, but at the same time they felt like I I was doing well in school. I was showing some promise, and they felt like it was very important.
Mm.
To educate yourself and so on. So I feel like just growing up, there was I don't think my parents were applying pressure on me, but they were just
Yeah.
encouraging me to use my brain and
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
study. So I think it was just through that culture at home
Mm.
that I had this idea that okay, I should go to high school. Plus, most of my closest friends went to high school, with maybe a couple of
Mm.
exceptions. So in the end of the day, it was pretty
It was
easy
pretty.
easy
Well, so
choice.
what did you like about high school?
So I like the social aspect of it. I have to say the most. It was a lot of fun. Um, uh, Transformative years. Plus, I went through in high school. I went through a period of being a rapper as well. So
Oh yeah.
yeah. I like to tell people that I'm a recording artist because we have a couple of home studio albums that me and
Oh
my
yeah.
my buddies made. Unfortunately, not available on Spotify at least yet. But yeah, but school wise, I always enjoyed English, math, and history and philosophy and so on. Oh, and psychology was
Mm.
another one that I was really into. So there was a moment of time actually in high school when I thought that maybe I'm gonna try to apply to college to study psychology or
Mm. They had
or
all
or
those
some something
classes
like
in
that.
your high school?
Yeah. There
Oh,
was like multiple
like
classes you could take
we
on
didn't
like
have philosophy or psychology.
yeah. Yeah,
Huh.
yeah. That was a big thing, and it's like a pretty standard thing in the Finnish high school curriculum, or at least was at the time. I may
Yeah,
have
yeah,
lost
yeah.
track of what's going on nowadays.
Right. Well, if I could have like convinced your teachers to like tell me their thoughts about what kind of student you
Hmm.
were, what kind of like maybe your the teachers in your best classes and the teachers in your least favorite classes. What kind of range of opinions you think they would have told me like
Mm.
Mika's this kind of kid and he's gonna do this kind of thing?
So I would that's a tough one. I'll say at least that. So I was a good student.
Yeah.
I was definitely a good student and somewhat hardworking.
Mm,
I think if you ask my parents, they might say that I could have been more hardworking.
right.
Again, I was disciplined enough that I did my homework and I studied to the exams and so on.
Mhm.
So I was a hardworking kid and did well in school. I wouldn't say that I was something. I was necessarily a student that stood out as like one of the most amazing students in there, but
Yeah.
I was doing pretty well, pretty
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Did you know, so when you're finished in high school, had you taken any econ classes yet?
No, no, and actually, so I had a lot of trouble deciding after high school what I want to do when I grow up.
Mm,
And a side note, as important background from about the Finnish college system in Finland. When you apply to college, you actually apply to study, with some exception maybe, but you apply to study for a specific major.
mm,
So, if you want to, you have to decide before even applying to college that, hey, I want to become a history major, or I want to become a psychology major or econ major and so on.
mm.
So I didn't know what I want to do. And actually, in the end of high school, I thought I wanted to do a business degree, become a business major. And at the time, at least, when you were applying to business schools to do an undergrad, in Finland, there was five entrance exam books that you had to choose four that you were going to read and take a test on.
Mm,
And
mm.
one of those five books was a book on economics. And I remember as a high school senior taking that economics book, having a look at it, skimming it through, and I thought it was the most boring book I've ever seen in
Was
my
it a
life. So
textbook
yeah, it was
or
yeah, it
some,
was textbook, like a basic, like an econ 101 or something like that.
yeah.
I thought it was super boring. So at the time, I
Mm,
thought that, okay, like I'm going to study the other books, and economics is boring. I'm not going to touch that.
right.
Now, I ended up not even applying in the end of the day, and I did my mandatory military service. I get some time to think
Oh,
about my future. So I
yeah.
was two after high school. I was 2 years out of school because of how the military service kind of aligned with my schedule. And after finishing my military service, I had actually decided that I want to study history.
Mm,
So I applied to study history in college, and I was super serious about that. But then I didn't get in.
yeah.
But I had, fortunately, a backup plan, and I had applied to study statistics as my
Mm.
as my major, and
Wait,
that
you
was.
have to apply to your major from high school?
Yes, yes. When you're entering college, you're applying for a specific major. So I
Oh.
applied to study history, and I had to take an entrance exam to get in.
Mm.
And
Oh, that's the cutoff. It's a history exam. It's not your grades.
yeah,
It's
exactly. Yeah, grades matter.
oh,
High school grades and so on matter as well. But you have to take an entrance exam. At least, again,
uh,
that was true back then.
that's yeah.
And so history, so I didn't get in to the history major. I had applied to statistics. Statistics was sufficiently unpopular that you could get in with your high school grades. You didn't have to take an entrance exam. So I got in
Mm,
to study statistics. So I went to college to study statistics as my major.
mm,
But I was then, going through this phase of trying to figure out what I'm going to like. I wasn't necessarily super excited about statistics at the time, and I
yeah.
wanted to think about what else I'm going to do in college. And that's when I found out about, like, I was reintroduced to economics because I read in some guidebook provided by the university that economics is a good minor for statistics majors. So
Oh.
that's when I decided that, okay, I'm going to go and do a minor in economics and major in statistics. And but then I started college. I went to my econ 101 class, and I
That's
was
your
blown.
freshman year? That was your
Yeah,
freshman.
yeah, exactly. And I was blown away.
Really?
So I don't know what was the difference between the textbook I had looked at before and the lectures, but I thought the lecturer first of all was very charismatic. So
Mm,
the lectures were very entertaining, and and suddenly, something clicked. I was like, wow, this is amazing. We're kind of learning about, because I had been interested in psychology as well, and so on. So
Yeah.
I felt like we're learning about human behavior and the society and so on. And I was also, I think, sort of appeal from the fact that you can just draw a graph
Yeah.
of sorts, and there's a story that you can tell
Yeah.
based on the graph, and how curves move. And so I just fell in love with economics at that point, and
Mm.
I then started studying economics with the econ majors, but also at the same time, I fortunately for me and for the rest of my career, I got very excited about statistics as well. So once I started
Mm.
studying statistics, my first year in college, I also realized that, wow, like statistics is pretty interesting also. So I ended up in the end of the day switching my major from statistics to economics. But I also continued, I essentially continued to as a double major in economics and
They
statistics.
just don't have double majors or something.
Yeah, it's a little bit, it's a vaguer concept in some sense. But I was
Mm.
basically, so I was officially an econ major, but then I continued studying statistics alongside with the cohort of stats majors that I had started my studies with. So, and
Oh, okay.
that ended up being great for me because obviously, I would learn later that, oh, like economics and statistics is a pretty good
Did you
good combination.
sense did you sense in college that they were complementary, or was it you just
Oh
loved
yeah,
both?
yeah. So initially it was just that I kind of had a sense that they are complementary, but for me it was first and foremost it was driven by the fact that I just once I started taking these classes, I in college I just kind of fell in love with both subjects,
Mm.
and was super fascinated by them. But then once you start, let's say in the economics classes, when you start reaching the level of like you're taking your first econometrics classes and all that stuff, and start having some exposure to empirical research
Yeah.
at a very high level at that point. But anyway, you start realizing that wait, there's something to be said about this mix and this combination and the complementarities and I think again in hindsight I've been so happy because we'll get to this later, but that I feel like that kind of paved the way for me becoming a methods guy and at least an
Right.
applied econometrician later in the day.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Sure. So, because you're not just graduating with that one econometrics class, you've got a much deeper understanding of stats than even most incoming first year students, I bet.
Exactly. And then the other thing is that if I had been an econ major, in all honesty, I'm not sure if I would have necessarily realized the value of studying math in
Right.
college and
Oh,
taking a
they
math
didn't.
minor. Because there's the requirements. If the math requirements for econ majors were very minimal, but for stats majors there was uh, a more comprehensive math minor requirements. So
Right.
because I was studying stats as well, with the stats majors, I also ended up doing the math minor as
Oh,
a result. And again, at the time, I didn't think about how valuable that would turn out to be. But
yeah, that's a lucky draw.
yeah, yeah,
Right. Uh, yeah, because then you're not having to, when you're deciding to get a PhD, you're not doing the thing where you're like, I don't have enough math, which is like so
exactly.
common for the econ major.
Yeah, exactly. And I was, you know, I may have been at least among the people I know of my time at the university, most of it, I was at a surprisingly early stage in my college journey when I actually started talking about how wanting to do a PhD. I didn't even know what that means, but I was just and I don't know where I got that obsession, but at some point I just like school in college I became. If I said earlier that in high school my parents might have said that I could have studied harder, in college, what happened was that I first went to college thinking that this is going to be really hard and I'm not going to be able to survive here. Again, I was, first in my family to go to college, so I wasn't.
Yeah.
It was intimidating to me. But then, I realized after studying really hard to the first exams, in order to not fail, I
Right.
realized that wow, by putting in the work, I can actually excel here.
Oh,
So it almost became a drug of sorts that I kind of became addicted with doing really well. in school while in
Oh,
college, and maybe that was what led to, me
that
getting this
hadn't
idea
been
that
the
I'm not
case
going to
in high
stop
school?
at. No, not yet. In high school, it's more about like, this is what you have to do, and this is what
Right.
I'm supposed to do, and this sense of responsibility. But in college, I just found this inner motivation. I was like,
Oh,
and I was really just, I was working like crazy in college.
oh, that's cool. Huh. That's really cool. So when did you decide? So you end up doing this master's, you stay at Jyväskylä,
Yeah, yeah.
University of Jyväskylä. You stay there. Is that because you are thinking about the doctoral program, or is there some other reason you just stay for the master's?
Oh yeah. So okay. So another piece of context on the Finnish college education system. So in Finland, actually, a master's degree is kind of the basic degree you get from, well, like when you go to college, like in the sense that it's, if you're going to college, or to study in a university, you'll do a bachelor, but that's going to be just an intermediate step to getting a master's. So everyone enters university in Finland with the idea of going up to the master's level. So there's a
Oh, is that right?
yeah. So it was just like the basic degree, just like in the U.S. you would get your basic degree would be getting a bachelor. In Finland
Oh,
you would get the master's degree. So that's why I was there, and that was just the standard deal of doing the master's. But the way, so again, I somehow got the idea that I want to do a PhD.
you did
But
while you were doing the master's or the undergrad?
while I was doing the probably while I was doing the bachelor, and because of getting that idea from, again, somewhere, I wish I remembered where I got that idea from. I was obsessed with the idea that I'm not going to stop at the master's level. I want a PhD. And so, and given my stats interests and econ interests, I got really interested in getting exposed to research in economics, empirical research in economics in particular. So
Mm,
my university had this this trainership program where one thing you could do is go to a research institute in Finland and spend the summer as a research trainee, basically. Basically just think of it as being an RA.
yeah.
And so I became an RA for a researcher at
Eh,
one of the research institutions in Finland, in Helsinki, and
Oh,
that was a game changer for me. So I did that at a relatively early stage of my university education, during the bachelor's degree stage. And I remember this researcher, Roope Uusitalo, who I was working for. Uh, he started basically pushing me, in terms of my PhD dreams, because I was thinking of doing a PhD in Finland. I
mm,
wasn't thinking about going abroad at all. And Roope, my boss at the time at this research institute, when he heard that I'm interested in doing a PhD, and I think he maybe saw something in me and was happy with my work, and so on, he started pushing me, with the idea that, hey, don't you have to think bigger? Like, don't just do a PhD in Finland. You should go and do your PhD abroad. And my initial
mm.
thought was that, hey, okay, I'm gonna do a PhD abroad. I'm gonna go to Sweden because that's gonna be close to home.
Oh, that
Uh,
was abroad.
yeah, that was you're abroad, but you're close to home. So I was thinking I'm gonna go to Sweden, but
Ah,
he kept on nudging me, and I started looking into the PhD application process and so on, and as I was doing that, suddenly I found myself thinking that, hey, maybe I'll apply to a few European universities, like outside of Sweden.
mm,
Maybe I'll apply to, I was thinking about, I'm going to apply to LSE and UCL and those kind of places.
yeah.
And then, but he kept on nudging me, have you considered the US? There's top schools in the US, like, you should just aim high. And it was actually the night before taking the GRE when I made the decision that I'm gonna send, like, there's some number of schools that you could send the GRE results, at least at the time, you could send them automatically to a couple of schools or something like that.
Yeah.
So I decided that the night before taking my GRE that, hey, I'm gonna apply to a handful of schools in the US as well. Just
Mm.
just so I can say that I tried. So that was kind of a late in the game decision for me. So I ended up in the end of the day applying to 5 schools in the US and I think 5 schools in Europe, just to see how things go. And I was a relatively successful applicant in Europe because my university at a global scale was not necessarily super known, but
Yeah.
and my letter writers were not necessarily super known either. So, but within Europe, they were well connected, and
Mm.
I was pretty successful with my applications. In the US, instead, I think their reputation didn't carry across the Atlantic. So in the US with my applications, I was getting, rejections, after rejections until at some point, I think may have been the last school from the US that to respond to me. Suddenly in my email, I have acceptance from MIT. So MIT was the only school in the US out of the
But
market. I mean,
you knew it was a big deal, right?
oh yeah, at that point, yeah, at that point I had done my homework. I started understanding more about the landscape with departments and PhD programs and so on. And I had put MIT as a total reach in
Yeah.
my application portfolio and so on. And yeah, that I had before getting the email from MIT, I was thinking about. I think I was pretty serious about going to LSC to do the master's program there or something like that.
Yeah.
But then the email from MIT changed everything
Oh my gosh. What
at
did
once.
that feel like? What did you,
Oh,
what,
that felt unreal and amazing. I still remember very well when I was actually taking a stats exam that
Mhm.
morning, and right before the exam, I went to the computer classroom to check my emails, and I got the acceptance just like let's say 15 minutes before I had to sit on an exam. So I remember maybe I was trying to brag a little bit as well because I remember going to the exam room and I went to my stats professor and told him that hey, apologies in advance that I might do poorly on this exam because I just got accepted to MIT for their PhD program, so I'm a little bit distracted. Um,
What did he say? Was he
oh,
surprised? He
he
must
was
have been.
he was surprised and super excited for
Oh
me.
gosh.
It was so it was I mean it was definitely not common from my university for people
Yeah.
to go necessarily in general to go abroad for PhDs, but
Yeah.
especially to a place like MIT. But also I would say it's not super common from Finland overall either. I'm mostly talking
Mm.
about econ. That's the land, the space I know the best. But so it was I mean a big deal for me personally, but also
I
more
bet.
generally. So and it's the way I see it is that I mean I looked good on paper. If you think about I was doing well in school and
Sure.
and had good test results and all that stuff. So I had the package, but so does everyone else. But
Yeah.
so what really ended up happening, at least the way I think about it, is that again, it's all about the letter writers and are they known and so on. And I've been later in my career, I've been on the other side of PhD admissions, so I kind of
Yeah.
know how it works. So the thing that helped me with MIT was that I like to think that MIT kind of has unofficially kind of like a quota for one student from Finland in the stock. Just because Bengt Holmström is from Finland, and there's this kind of
Oh
Finnish
yeah.
connection. So there's a lot of bigger countries from which every incoming cohort of MIT econ students, there's going to be like a couple of folks from Italy and France and so on, like every year. Whereas in
Yeah.
Finland, roughly, I felt like there's typically one student at the time in the whole 5-year program, and
Oh
last Finn had graduated a few years before me, I think, before I applied.
yeah.
So I feel like there was an opening. So I had a good timing. There was an opening for a Finn, and at least one or two of my letter writers had done like visits at MIT in the past. So some folks
Oh.
knew them there, and Ben Holmström knew my letter writers and was able to assess my application package and performance. Uh, Better than in some of the other schools that didn't have any connection to Finland. So
Well,
so
what
yeah.
was it? That is, I just can only imagine how the rush that must have been, especially since you'd worked so hard, and then it actually you get this. this outcome that was directly, I mean, you couldn't have gotten it had you not gotten addicted to doing well in school or
Exactly.
doing well, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it was definitely a dream come true, and
Ah,
felt unreal for a while.
yeah, but
And as well, and still when I went there as well, I have to
yeah.
say, I remember, there was some orientation stuff for new students or something like that in the beginning, and I just remember we were at this auditorium and someone was giving a
Mm,
speech and talking about all the great things that MIT PhDs have done. Like this was for the all PhDs, students
yeah.
across like disciplines and so on. And I was just still at that point, I had to kind of pinch myself that like, is this really
I know
happening?
it's
Like,
like a
what
hall of
am I doing? What am I doing here?
but it's like a Hall of Fame university, you know. It's
Exactly.
like where so much of the story of economics just comes out of there and
Yeah,
keeps coming back there. It's really
yeah,
wonderful. It's
yeah.
really what did you think that first year then? What were the classes like?
Oh boy, hard.
They were hard, even though you had like were
Oh.
really well prepared.
So actually, to give you a little bit more nuanced answer, so micro and macro, I struggled,
Mm.
and I, but on the other hand, at least again at the time at MIT, the tradition was that you take a take a field class in your first year as well. So I
Oh,
did
in the
micro.
first year you
Yeah,
take a
exactly.
field?
So I did micro. So I did the mandatory micro macro sequence in the first year and econometric sequence, and then
Hmm.
I did my labor economics classes already in my first year. So
Mm.
so again, given my stats econ combination from undergrad and having worked in research, empirical research already, and I forgot to mention that I was doing labor economics research,
Oh, yeah.
back in Finland. So
Uh-huh.
I skipped this part. I was doing kind of I mentioned that one RA thing, but I was actually doing multiple RA things over a few years.
Yeah.
So I had gotten my feet wet, in terms of like research and was co-authoring some papers at the time and so on. So and in labor. So for me, econometrics and labor were, the kind of the classes where I was doing pretty well and felt like I was in my comfort zone. Micro and macro, on the other hand, maybe my background on that side was a little bit lacking. But what saved me was that MIT, and maybe this applies to other schools as well. I can't say because I have no experience, but at least at MIT and in the culture among students was such that it was super collaborative.
That's what I've
So
heard about
yeah,
MIT.
that was the magical thing about especially the first year, that we were just a group of kids who were just trying to look after each other. So
Mm.
we were studying together. We were, doing homework together, studying for to exams together, and so on. And I thank my classmates for kind of pulling me through, the
Mm.
first year, especially the micro macro sequence.
Mm.
That was a huge help. It was kind of a
Mm.
work hard, party hard type of year, I would say, in
Yeah, yeah.
many ways. It
So
was
the
a lot of fun.
incentives, something about the institutions don't have it be students are in competition with each other.
Exactly, not at all. It was super
That's great.
collaborative, and also, MIT is not one of those programs where they're weeding people out.
Right.
So the idea is that if you're admitted, the plan is that you're gonna one way or
You're
another
gonna finish.
you're gonna finish,
Mm.
and so that helped as well. So there was no need for us to compete, and um, and there was no and I never felt any competition either in terms of like competing for advisors or something like that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like
Yeah.
just because I feel like the professors had so much time for us. I feel
Right.
like they were putting so high priority for advising and working with students that you didn't have to compete for that professor's time
Yeah.
and energy, because you kind of knew that they're going to have plenty to give to everyone. And
That's the
so
culture also, right? The professors are I remember reading that even goes back to Samuelson, that
yeah.
he had a strong influence on what the department came by emphasizing the mentoring part.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And so again, as a kind of my interest being labor economics and econometrics
Yeah.
and so on, one thing that happened in my first year as well, which was important for my future, I feel like, was that I came in, wanting to, like, one of the main guys I wanted to work with was Josh Angrist,
Mm.
and I was looking up to his work a lot, and so I took labor with him the first year, my first fall.
That was when you picked that labor class, it was his
Yeah,
labor class.
exactly. He's labor class, and I reached out to him like super early on in the first year, asking if he has any RA work for me or anything like that.
Yeah.
And he took me as an RA, and that kind of planted the seed for our relationship, our close relationship
Mm.
throughout the PhD, in terms of
Mm.
working for him, working with him, and
Yeah.
and so on. It was a so that was
What's
great.
his, what do you think? What do you think for if you had to explain to someone that's like, an economist or a student, but that, obviously doesn't know Josh and can't really articulate, how would you explain to another person, this is Josh Angrist's value added piece to every, to my life or to students in general? What do you get? I mean, I know it's counterfactual stuff, but what do you think you get from Josh that you don't get? Like, I don't know. What is it you think you get in general?
Yeah. So one of the things is definitely that I always so I mean, one thing I'll say first is that, again, the the match was great in terms of what I wanted to be. And again, I kind of I had that sufficient experience, exposure to research and so on, that I came to MIT kind of thinking I know what I want to do, and I ended up kind of executing on that in terms of my research institute and so on. So I was very much interested in doing labor, doing applied econometrics, or, like, hovering somewhere in between econometrics and labor. Um,
Yeah,
and that was such a good match
that's
with the
yeah.
kind of stuff that Josh does. So that was a big thing for me, first of all, that our interests were just so aligned, and
Mm.
I think mostly harmless econometrics had come out a little bit before
Yeah. Oh nine,
I
right?
went, because I
It's
went,
like
yeah,
oh
it's
nine,
09.
2010 or something.
I started 09, and I think it had come out before that.
Yeah.
So mostly harmless was, a book that I was just I was sucking all the knowledge out of it, and that was the kind of stuff that I was really into. So that was a big thing. But then also the other thing is that, I felt like, you know sometimes I think I've referred to Joss as a very fatherly figure.
Mm.
I felt like he really, really, wanted to see you succeed, and
Yeah.
was putting a lot of effort into making that happen. And it's not just only,
Mm.
the research part and so on, which plays a big role, but also, him, and then Parag Patak was another person I was working with. I was RAing for both of them in the
Yeah.
beginning, and they became my main advisors. And they both not only helped me with the research side of things, but they also helped me with to navigate a lot of the other stuff around the profession, in terms of, the importance of networking, and so it's like, one thing they did to me was that, very at a very early stage, they, for instance, took me with them to a conference in I
Oh,
believe it was in Israel, this conference, and they took me with them there. I was RAing on the paper that they presented at that conference,
yeah.
and the idea was just that I get some, I get exposed to what it's like to be at a conference like that, but also, I start mingling and meeting people and so on. So they just supported me in these kinds of ways, like understanding, getting a sense of how
Mm.
the game is played, if you will.
Oh, so a lot of the
Soft,
non-cognitive
yeah, a lot of the
ability.
soft, exactly, a lot of the soft stuff
Yeah.
as well,
Right, right. Which
and
is huge. The hidden
yeah,
curriculum. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So
Right.
that was big for me.
Oh, okay. So, what did you end up writing your dissertation on? Was it a lot of this regression discontinuity design material?
Yeah. You know what? During my PhD, I I did a lot of other things. There was a lot of projects that I worked on, and some that turned into papers, and didn't necessarily turn into publications, but turned into papers, and would have been potential dissertation chapters. But in the end of the day, partly for I guess for internal consistency in my thesis. I ended up writing my thesis about the regression discontinuity design only. I think my thesis was called something like extrapolation and bandwidth choice in regression discontinuity design or something along those lines. So I, what basically shaped my most interesting research agenda during my PhD was actually the RA work I did for Josem Parag, starting from my first year and actually kind of almost throughout my 5 years at MIT. So they were working on this paper, forget the full title, but Elite Illusions was the kind of the nickname for the paper. So it was about the selective schools in Boston and New York.
Yeah.
And so I was working as an RA on that paper, and it was an RD paper. So I just got
What's the running variable?
so that was test scores, like entrance
Test
exam
scores.
score. Yeah, entrance exam scores the customers had, not customers. See, here's the Amazon coming up. The students had taken. So I just got fascinated about the regression discontinuity design. Again, I was a method geek. I was a method geek and a applied econometrician. And so I got, as I was working on the RA stuff, I just wanted to learn everything there is to learn about RD. And then it was also a natural progression for me to start thinking about, kind of these more methodological aspects of it. Like in terms of like as you're doing empirical research, there's all kinds of practical econometrics questions that come up, stuff related to bandwidth choice or there was the question about, hey, we're identifying very credibly these impacts for these marginal students or marginal applicants, but what are the impacts for the high achievers or whatnot. So you start having these extrapolation related questions in mind and so on. So I was basically just sucking all kinds of research ideas from that work, seeing the kind of applied econometrics problems that came about. So I would both during my PhD as well.
Something about this particular institutional setup had an unusual like RD opportunity to it. It wasn't like or was it just that? Well, yeah. So like, why? It's funny. I mean, what was it you were noticing with these schools that were opening up your mind a little bit?
Yeah, no. So there was some one of the specific things about these schools was that it was kind of this. There's multiple schools that were kind of ranked, and there's like these multiples cutoff. I'm simplifying a little bit, but multiple cutoffs. The better you are, there's like these jumps at higher levels and so on. So there's that. That was kind of the one specific aspect about these schools. But for me, it was basically these questions about like, I mean, there was the bandwidth stuff that I worked on, but on the extrapolation side, that ended up especially becoming a kind of an obsession for me. It was really about those questions about, hey, let's say for instance, I think the finding was roughly that like these marginal applicants are not benefiting in terms of going to these schools versus not. But then there's a lot of interest in, hey, what about the top kids? Like, is it for the high achieving kids? Is it good for them to go to these schools versus not?
And they're far away from the cutoff.
It's far away of the cutoff. So that's got me very excited about and interested in the idea of why, extrapolating the impacts and thinking about, because I was always, what really excited me about econometrics was, even though I did a little bit of bandwidth choice stuff, which was like more, kind of, technical in nature, my interest in econometrics and applied econometrics was always more about the identification stuff. So I was fascinated by thinking about different types of assumptions that we can make to identify some kind of impact and thinking about that spectrum, because in a sense, the way I sometimes have said it, that like in one extreme you can always assume the answer. So that's you can just assume the answer and know what it is. But on the other hand, you can assume nothing and maybe you learn nothing either. And I've always been interested in kind of trying to cover that spectrum in between of like, how much do I need to assume or how little can I assume to be able to identify something from the data. And And so then the extrapolation problem was just one thing that got me fascinated. What kind of assumptions could I have my standard RD set up, and what kind of additional assumptions I could sprinkle on top to be able to get away from the impact for the marginal folks and extrapolate away. And then so actually my job market paper ended up being about extrapolation in the RD design, and actually the application was these exam schools as well. But where my job market paper idea came from was that I started thinking about the fact that, hey, this running variable is test scores. But I don't necessarily think that these test scores matter in and of themselves, but instead these test scores are kind of a proxy for some kind of, let's call it your ability or something like that. Because there's a lot of noise potentially in this test score as a proxy for ability. Maybe you had a good day when you took the test, maybe a bad day, whatnot. There's all kinds of reasons why you might be doing better than expected, less well than expected. So that got me into thinking about this idea that, hey, imagine the running variable is actually a noisy proxy of something that matters.
Oh, yeah.
Like a latent factor that matters.
Yeah.
And so if I observe that latent factor of these students, their innate ability, then that would be what really matters, and conditional on that, that's what's driving the selection, and that's what's driving the heterogeneity in treatment effects. And whereas the noise in the running variable is just essentially a source of random variation for me.
Oh, so you can use that.
Yeah, so then that's where the idea came of, like, okay, let's say we have, in this case, we had multiple measures of like multiple test scores and so on. So that got me into thinking about this latent factor structure and building this like latent factor based extrapolation approach for
Wait, is
RD.
this the JASA with Josh?
Oh, no. So what happened was that I had this job market paper, or what turned into my job market paper, this idea of this latent factor based extrapolation. And I was selling that idea to Josh and Parag and getting very excited about this. And I just remember one day I was having a meeting with Josh in his office about my to be job market paper idea about latent factor extrapolation, and then we started having a chat about the fact that, hey, this is cool and ambitious, but isn't there a simpler version of as well, a simpler and more practical version of it? Like in my original idea, it's about latent factors and a lot more moving parts and complications to make it happen. But what if you just assumed that there's a set of observables under which the running variable becomes as good as or the treatment becomes as good as randomly assigned, or the running variable actually becomes as good as randomly assigned. So we started, brainstorming with Josh about the simplification to my original idea. That instead of latent factors, let's make an assumption conditional on observables. And that simpler idea and arguably more practical idea is what turned eventually into our JASA article.
You leave behind the latent index thing?
No, so then I was working in parallel on the two. So me and Josh were collaborating on that what turned into that JASA paper with the observable extrapolation based on observables, and in parallel I was working on that latent factor approach as well.
Had anybody done that kind of thing before, trying to identify away from the cutoff using an unconfoundedness assumption?
So I think so. Both the observable, the JASA approach with the observables and the latent factor approach, I think they were novel in the literature at the time per se, but I don't think we were the first ones to think about extrapolation. Otherwise, I think now it's been such a long time that my memory isn't serving me well, but I do have this vague memory of writing a section on probably both papers on talking about extrapolation approaches that were out there already, and there was some stuff about, I think there was some stuff about using the kind of the slopes at the cutoff to kind of do these kind of more like if you will, like functional form type extrapolations and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
right. Trying to
But
fit the expected potential outcomes
yeah,
kind of off the form.
yeah, exactly. Either fully with like parametric assumptions, or like more locally with just like trying to extrapolate the slopes right at the cutoff, or
Okay.
something like that. I think so. So there was some stuff around, but our approaches were not there. And I think around the same time or after, like more stuff started coming up. There was I think some folks were working on something that utilized the fact that they had like multiple cutoffs, like a ton of
Yeah.
cutoffs at different points in distribution, so extrapolating based on that. And so
Yeah.
there was something, I don't necessarily follow that literature too well anymore, because I don't do
Mm,
RD work too much in my current stuff, in my
mm.
current work. But there was at least a period of time, around when I worked on extrapolation, where I think like extrapolation was kind of a booming topic. Um,
Mm.
and there's been, I think there's been new research come out as well later, like maybe even within the past few years, that are based on similar ideas that as my latent factor stuff.
Wow, that's cool.
Sadly, my latent factor extrapolation stuff, it got me a job, but then, as I left in the end of the day, left academia and so on, it kind of got
Oh,
buried
so
away.
you never submitted it?
It's one I submitted it. I did submit it. It was hurts to say this out loud, but it was a RNR at Econometrica, and I just didn't end up. I left academia before did anything about it, and didn't bother to do anything about it after that. So,
Oh,
uh,
this is a good this is a good segue then, because the way that you're talking, if I had thought about every guest that I've had on the podcast and I said rank them in terms of who you think would leave academia to go work in industry, I would have you in the bottom part,
oh
because
wow,
you just seem like a passionate academic. So I'm curious, you end up at Columbia, but you only stayed for 3 years. What
yeah,
was it that drew you out?
yeah. So, that was another dream come true.
I
I
bet.
I was so. I mean, I'll say that, when I was entering the job market, I had some interest in the industry at that point already,
It's
but
already
I
booming at this point. So it's like
yeah, exactly.
2014. Yeah.
I had a former office mate from MIT who had gone to Amazon, and I had heard
Mm,
good things about. He was happy there, and so I had some interest, and I applied and
yeah.
got an offer at the time when I was on the market.
Mm,
But still at that point, it was, I indeed was a passionate academic, and I really, I had always thought that when I grow up I want to be a professor.
yeah.
So so once I got a couple of offers from academia for
Yeah.
assistant professorships, it was clear at that point that, I'm not going to go to industry right now. I want to become a professor. I'm going to try that. And again, one day I never forget is one of the first days I had started at Columbia, and I had the apartment was close to campus. I remember walking past the campus to the department one of the first days, and I think I called my mom on the way to work, and I was telling kind of her that I've probably never been as happy in my life. Like, this is, just amazing. I made it, and so on.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed. So I really enjoyed my time at Columbia. It was a great place to be. I'm so happy I did it.
Yeah.
Um, but what but one realization I had already during grad school, and started having more so while I was at Columbia, and which kind of relates a little bit to me dropping the ball with the R&R at Econometrica with my job market paper, was that I realized, like, one thing I learned about myself was that I'm a problem solver, and I get super excited about taking a applied econometrics problem and solving it.
Yeah.
But once I've solved the problem, I may have not been as excited
Oh,
anymore about educating others
yes.
about the solution. So I
That's why
found,
you got an R&R sitting at Econometrica.
yeah, because I wasn't,
Yeah.
I was super excited about getting that R&R, but
Yeah.
I wasn't somehow getting enough
Ah,
motivation out of making it happen, doing the work.
yeah.
I had, as much as I was excited about coming up with the initial idea. So so that was kind of a pattern I saw repeating. I got excited about ideas, and problems, and I solved the problems, and then the writing part was like, I don't know, like, so
I
so
totally
so
get it. I'm the same way.
so that's what then at some point got me, I was talking with, again, with my former office mate who was at Amazon, and I was talking with him, and I was telling him about this pattern I'm seeing in my level of
Yeah.
excitement about different parts of the job, and so on, and as I was talking with him and he was describing what he does in Amazon, and so on at a high level, I realized that, hey, maybe the industry is the right place for me, because I felt like, okay, this is more fast paced. There's
Right.
there's an endless amount of problems to solve. There's a lot of
Yeah. Right.
applied econometrics problems that I love solving that you can solve there, but there it's more about, you solve a problem, you maybe build something on top, based on it, and
Yep.
and and you move on, and so on, and
It's not like third round R&R type stuff. It's like, yeah.
exactly. So the emphasis on solving problems, building stuff,
Mm,
and in a fast-paced fashion and so on, that got me
mm,
super interested, and
hmm.
that's how, I ended up then looking into that option, ended up applying to Amazon, and talking with a few other companies and applying to a few other
So
companies.
wait, Miikka, you around the third year are already starting to kind of notice this and you reach out. You're noticing this like, there's like a little bit of a bug inside you that's kind of
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
this part I don't really like, and there's this outside option that
Yeah,
I'm going to
yeah.
look at it.
It just started,
Oh,
over time, it's started feeling like a more and more appealing option.
yeah, yeah.
I had some discussions about it, and the more I discussed, the more I got excited, and yeah,
You can kind of, I mean, the story that you've told, I don't know if this is exactly right because there's nothing about this that would require this, but like you can hear in the story you told that you've kind of got this like, well, there was something you said addicted to doing it, but that's not, and like, so you could see that being like, well, even the switch from stats to econ, it was kind of like this drawing to this thing that you were just super into.
yeah,
Have you always been just kind of like intensely focused on particular
oh,
things, like loves
yes,
and passions and stuff like that?
yes.
Because even the hockey as a little kid.
Yeah, I'm definitely that way.
Yeah.
I am. So this is sometimes a good thing and sometimes a bad thing. I
Yeah.
get extremely obsessed with problems.
Yeah.
One thing I remember from going back to grad school for a second, one thing I remember in terms of this kind of personality trait, I I remember some weekends when I was like stuck working through some econometrics problems for my research and so on. Like, I would spend the whole weekend basically in my little studio,
Yeah.
and I would just have, by the end of the weekend, I would have like pieces of paper, like, crumpled together and thrown around the room, because I had just been, I called them my
Mhm.
beautiful mind moments. I just couldn't stop thinking a problem. I would sleep a little bit in between and then continue figuring it out. Just
Mm,
pen and paper stuff, trying to figure stuff out.
right.
And that has continued to be a thing for me, that I get super into something, like solving something. I want to
Yeah.
solve it,
Yeah.
and that often, guides me, my interest and my
And
work.
Amazon has been a place where that kind of thing that's not punished. It's like it's a feature, not a bug to have it at
Exactly,
Amazon. Right.
exactly,
How
exactly.
come? So what have you noticed at Amazon where it's like, oh yeah, this actually is a superpower here?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's the so it's just, because I mentioned earlier, there's endless amounts of problems that are just waiting to
Mm,
be solved, and especially in the beginning when I joined as a new person, I see this with new people coming in, nowadays as well. It's always amazing when someone comes from the outside, and looks at problems from a different angle, and
yeah.
and sees new ways of looking at them, and solving them, and there's different types of roles at Amazon, even for economists to have, and I've been, and this is a match question again, but I've been fortunate enough to be in a role where again, it's a very science heavy role.
Mm.
And it is about, building centralized solutions, and it's really about building things and based like building things on top of science.
Mm.
And so there's a
So
very
they're not all
key
like
element.
that. Not all the economists, not all the principal economists. The science part, you're making a
Uh,
point because it's not
so so
everybody.
so the distinction I'm making is that some people might be more in an embedded role in a business. So
Mm.
it might be science is a big part of it always, but sometimes you might be in a role where you're advising a business, and it's maybe more about still a big science element to it, but it's more like day to day, solving certain problems they're facing. Whereas then there's these more core science teams that are building. They're almost like actually this is the distinction I sometimes use, and I think this applies to tech economists in general. There's the empirical, like there's the empirical researcher role, like a labor economist role, where you're it's like things you do is more like you're you're estimating something or writing like an empirical paper. And then there's the
Yeah.
econometrician role, where it's more about solving core science questions
Yeah.
in an effort to build
Yeah.
these generally applicable solutions that have users across the company and so on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm more in the latter camp, which for an
So you've been building a
applied
bunch of stuff. You can't publish it, but you've been building and building a ton of stuff.
yeah, there's a huge, so again, one thing that keeps a problem solver like me excited after spending 7 years at the company is that it's just like the science part of the job is just so exciting. Like there's so,
Ah.
I mean, there's certain elements of, like, let's say, econometrics that
Yeah.
like RD is a good example in my case. Like I used to call, like, before leaving academia, I considered myself some sort of an expert on RD. I
Mm.
was, at work, contributed to literature, knew the literature, and so on. Uh, After leaving academia and joining tech, there's certain, traditional applied econometrics topics where I feel like my knowledge has regressed because I don't, or at least I don't stay up to date on all the literature because
Yeah.
it doesn't touch my current work.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
then at the same time, the breadth after working in tech and the kind of problems that exist there, and working with machine learning, machine learning folks and computer scientists and whatnot, it's amazing what has happened to the breadth of
Mm.
stuff. And you start learning so much about different cool things that are happening in
Mm.
kind of different disciplines, and bringing, and again, like combining ideas from econometrics
Mm.
and so on. And so, and again, it's in the end of the day, it's about solving challenging and interesting methodological problems.
Mm.
And once you've solved them, let's say on a piece of on a pen and paper, then it's about actually building these scalable solutions based
Mm.
on those kind of ideas you had maybe on paper. So it's kind of the path from your notebook, actually,
Yeah.
this magical notebook here, something that the path from this notebook into some production system and into
So
like some
your
econometric
room is
problem.
still, it's just like the old days. Your room is still filled with the crumpled up piece of paper.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it is. So,
Ah.
yeah, still, very much like there's a very big pen and paper element to my
You
job.
couldn't have, was this a surprise or did you kind of have a sense it might be like this when you were leaving Columbia? I mean, how could you have
It
known
was
it was
a,
going
it
to be
was a,
like
it
this?
was a, it was a positive surprise. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't
That-
expecting that level of science breadth and depth.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and and for a geek like me,
Mm,
it's been absolutely amazing.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Uh, well, that's really cool. So, I mean, if you had stayed at Columbia, you'd be like a full professor now. And so, like at Amazon, being in one of these scientist roles, what's the future after where you are? I mean, where
Hmm.
does a person end up keep going?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So, it's so so there's two types of tracks that you could grow in. Like one is a managerial track and one is an individual contributor track.
Mm,
I'm on the latter track right now, and it's really just about um, it's really about broadening your scope, is
mm,
what happens. So, you know, at earlier levels, you start from, you're maybe working on problems assigned to you and solving those problems and so on. Then you start identifying problems to solve as
yeah.
you grow, at some point you start just supporting others who are solving those problems and maybe pointing problems for others to solve, and so it's kind of it's a pyramid in some sense, that structure in some sense, that it's become like the importance of delivering through others and scaling through others and having a bigger impact across the broader organization or the broader companies where the growth happens,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is which is pretty exciting.
That seems so exciting. Well, this is really cool. I want to end with one question. Uh, if you could, if is there, so I said, what do you wish you could tell? Okay. So what do you wish? So somewhere out there is this young grad student, and they're thinking, how do I know that um, academia or industry might be a thing that might make me happy
Hmm.
and may give me a meaningful career. And so, I know it's like everything's idiosyncratic in many ways to you or whatever, but you've really seen, how both sides
Mm.
live. How, without kind of advocating for one over the other, what do you think you would tell them to say, well, these are kind of the sufficient statistics for a person that might like one or the other?
Oh boy, that's a very good and tough question. Let's see. Um, you know, um, Actually, this applies to both. The first thing that comes to my mind is just the question of, like, are you a problem solver?
Mm,
And again, that applies to both sides of it. But I but also maybe one way to think about it is, like, do you get more excitement out of becoming, like, is it more about breadth or depth for you? Like, do you, at least one way you could think about it is that if maybe academia is more your route, if you feel like you want to go more into
go
depth, in the
deep.
sense that go deep on some problem and become an expert on that, and so on, and also, feel like you want to educate others about it,
Yeah.
write papers about it. I should say, though, like, even being a tech economist, like, big part of your job is educating others. So it's not like that doesn't happen,
Right.
but it's a different,
So you
different
actually, is this
style.
what you're saying, Mika? Like, actually, you had become an expert on RD, but then you said, I didn't keep up with it. And are you basically saying you really did want to move on, kind of?
Yeah, so I wasn't necessarily thinking about it. Like, so actually, in the RD land, I feel
Yeah.
like, one of the things I had to process when I left academia was that I had I had many ideas, even in the RD land, that I wanted to do. Actually, a lot of my ongoing projects at the time that I ended up not finishing up, they were RD related. So it was not quite that
Mm,
I was bored in that space and wanted to look for something else. Quite the opposite. Like, I kind of, for a moment, I felt like, oh, like, I had these ideas, and again, I wasn't motivated enough to try to work on them on the side. I kind of just let them go and went full in on my job at Amazon.
mm,
Uh, but it was more that. But I do feel like, at least my experience has been that, it's 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 more about breadth, maybe, on the industry
yeah.
side,
Yeah.
and it's more about fast. Again, I
Yeah.
can't emphasize the fast-paced nature of it enough. It's a lot more about incremental improvements, you know, in the sense that, you know, again, that was one transition for me, like, to work on coming from academia, that I was used to just, you know, trying to polish the last couple of percent or something like that, whether it's
Yeah,
paper
yeah, yeah.
or the approach or whatever. In the industry, you know, the mindset is a little bit different, because there's a lot of decisions that have to be made, you know, whether or not we have the data to make it them, or so on. So it's really not necessarily about getting to the ideal, or maybe you have a North Star that, you know, there's some, from a science perspective, some kind of an ideal solution that you want to aim, and that might be your North Star. But the question is not really, have you reached the ideal state to decide whether what you're proposing is a good thing or not. What really matters is, well, what you're proposing, is it better, or is it better than what we're doing today? And like, are we making better decisions based on this? So it's really about
Oh, I
this, you know,
see. Yeah, yeah,
incremental
yeah.
stuff, and you know, do fast and incremental improvements
Yeah.
is typically, again, there's exceptions, but typically the way to go, instead of, you know, going up on a mountain and staying there for a long time trying to
Yeah,
come
yeah,
up
yeah.
with the amazing idea. Whereas I felt like academia was, I mean, again, I'm exaggerating here, but maybe academia is a little bit more about, you know, you take your time, you try
Right.
to, you know, reach the ideal, and so on. But
Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah.
a lot of practical
Yeah.
challenges also that
I see what you mean
industries
by
have to.
depth. It's not, I don't want to become an expert in something. It makes me think, you know, what it would take for you to get that econometric of finished is almost like there's a degree of boredom and slog involved
Yeah.
that like you're ready to, the opportunity cost of it is more exciting projects.
Exactly. And, you know, you know, again, on the
Because
industry side, you're
you've already kind of
building.
figured it out.
Yeah, exactly. And again, there's people, like some folks, you know, some folks get excited about, you know, that
Yeah, yeah,
piece
yeah.
as well. But for me, that was not that. You know, I figured it out. You know,
Yep.
let's move on, or let's
Yeah, yeah,
build
yeah.
it, or so on. And you
Mm,
know, actually, I mean, I do a lot of writing at Amazon. It's not like it's not like that's not my part of my job. I do a
yeah,
lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
education on the solutions, and so on. So all these elements are there as well. But it's still, I guess for me, the big thing has been the concreteness of how your ideas are actually impacting,
Yep.
you know, decisions and so on, as well as the part about you actually building things. You know,
No, I
you're
totally.
working with engineers to build solutions.
Yep.
That's pretty cool.
No, it sounds like a great job. It sounds like a great job. I'm excited that I mean, you know, people go their whole life trying to figure out I'm a square I'm a square and I can't find a square hole. You know,
Yeah,
I'm a square in a circle hole and
yeah,
it's, you know, you do what you can. It sounds
yeah.
like you've gotten a really great draw and found it. That's really exciting.
Yeah, and I'm also happy. I have to say, I'm also happy. You know, if I do a little retrospective, I'm also so happy that I've taken, like, for instance, the academic detour, if you will.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so happy where I am now,
Mm,
working in tech and so on. But I'm also very happy, actually, that I didn't, like, for instance, go directly to tech from PhD and so on. Like, the fact that I spent the 3 years at Columbia, you know, they were really rewarding years in many ways. And again, especially because I had always dreamed of, or like, I spent grad school dreaming that I want to become a professor one day. So
yeah.
I got to experience that, because I've often thought to myself that, hey, you know, what if I had decided while on the job market that I'm going to go to tech now, and would I have spent a lot of time then, you know, thinking that what if, you know,
Yeah.
and so on. But now I tried the academic route, and I felt like maybe that wasn't the right place for me, and I found
Yeah.
something that is a better
Yeah.
fit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's that. I feel like for me, at least, that was the perfect path,
That's
and
kind of
and
even what
and
happened
don't
with
have to do the what if.
stats and econ.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
that's the
even
same.
it was
No,
the same thing.
exactly. I consider myself so lucky. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think I would be where I am now if I had found economics, like,
Yeah.
in a more linear
Yeah.
fashion,
Right. Right.
because
Right.
I probably wouldn't have ended up valuing realizing the value of stats and math, and
Yeah.
and wouldn't have that background. And
There's a
so,
lot of gifts with
perfect.
all these experiences. You don't always know exactly how it's going to pay off, but I mean, having these diversity of experiences, you start to learn so much about yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's really, really nice. I'm looking forward to us continue to interact on LinkedIn.
Likewise. Yeah.
Maybe we'll end up seeing each other one day and you
Yeah.
can teach me some hockey.
Yeah, I definitely hope so.
All right.
Great
Well,
chatting
good
with you.
luck with everything.
Thank you so much.
To the grave.